Welcome to Champion Minded, the podcast for those who aim for excellence, not only in the sports arena, but in life. My name is Allistair, author, speaker, mindset and performance coach, and my goal is to help you unleash your unlimited potential and provide you with the tools to achieve greatness. Are you ready to become champion minded? Then let's do this. Hey everybody, welcome to the Champion Minded podcast, or welcome back to the podcast. I'm Allistair McCall. In this week's episode of What It Takes, I have an absolute legend in the world of endurance sports. In fact, he was voted by ESPN as the greatest endurance athlete of all time, Mark Allen. Mark Allen is a 6-time Ironman Kona winner. In fact, he's someone that I grew up idolizing. I was a triathlete and duathlete myself in my past life. And I looked up to people like Mark Allen. I remember the duels that they had in Hawaii and the Kona Ironman, him and Dave Scott, just legendary stuff. He definitely inspired me to go on and have a career in triathlon and duathlon as well. And I never thought I'd get the opportunity to actually speak to Mark Allen one day or actually meet him. So the first one I've got to speak to him. I've got to interview him on the podcast, as you'll hear today. But I've yet to meet him, which definitely is on my bucket list. This podcast was probably, I've had some incredible people on the podcast, some inspirational and motivational people, but this is probably, I have to admit, one of my favorite podcasts I've ever done. You're going to find that Mark is one of the most humble, generous people there is. Just talk about someone that gives back to the sport. In fact, he actually runs his own coaching consultancy, Mark Allen Coaching Consultancy. And if you're definitely in the world of endurance sports, check that out. A few things that we spoke about on the podcast. Gosh, we actually covered so much, and Mark was so generous of his time as well, because here's the thing, he was actually heading out to Kona. This was done a year ago, guys. I have to apologize first of all to Mark, because this episode was damaged, and I've had to actually get it sent away to get the podcast or the episode fixed. Excuse my terminology. And I felt so bad about not telling Mark about this. So Mark, I apologize to you. It's a year late, but we're almost on the 41st edition of Kona, which last year was the 40th anniversary, which Mark speaks about as well. So better late than never, guys. What we speak about on this podcast is we cover things from mental strength. Mark dives into mindset a lot. You'll find that he's a very deep and spiritual thinker as well, if I can put it that way. He also talks about the ability to handle pressure and the pressure he put on himself as well. Learning from defeat, also his rivalry with Dave Scott, how that made him better, and actually a very interesting thing on how he saw that rivalry. He didn't see it as competition. He almost saw it as someone that was collaborating with him to be better, to be a better athlete. Mark also talks about grit, about the disappointment builds grit. That was very interesting as well. I asked Mark, what is grit? And he said, well, it's going through disappointment. He also talks about becoming a better person, something that we look at in Champion Minded quite a bit. The more better you can become in whatever you do, your career, you first of all have to become a better person as well. And he also talks about that there is no perfect race, and just what he learned from defeat as well. So guys, I know you're going to love this one. I'm not going to take any further time here. This is Mark Allen. Mark, welcome to the Champion Minded podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Allistair.
I know you're heading out to Kona for this year's Kona Ironman very soon. Is that right?
I am. I leave in 2 days. The race is Saturday, October 13th, and it's the 40th anniversary, so there's going to be a lot of, I think, little extra sparkle going on this year at the race.
Oh, wow. Have you been getting down there every year since, Mark? Pretty much?
I have. Every year since 1982, I've been there except for 1 year when I was racing. Most of the pros sat out. One of the years just kind of like, hey, if you want us there, you got to put some prize money in this thing. It's way too hard to come and just have fun, So anyway, I love it. I love going back each year to be around the event. I do work with my coaching. I do work with Ironman, the event is kind of as a brand ambassador and just a lot of stuff. It's a great event, just so much energy, and it's sort of like it's like my New Year's Eve. I go there, and when I come back, it feels like okay, that's the end of the year, and a new one's coming up.
Did you ever think at the beginning of your racing career that you would ever achieve so much and become one of the great legends of the sport when you first started out?
No, that's a great question, Allistair. I absolutely had no idea that I would have the potential that I did in the sport. As a kid, I was a competitive swimmer, and in swimming, there's all these different levels. So, if you're a great swimmer, then you end up going to the Olympics. If you're a pretty mediocre swimmer, there's a kind of a class for you, so you can compete against people that are your same speed, and sometimes you win races, but it certainly is nothing at a world-class level. And that was me as a swimmer. So when I got into the sport of triathlon 2 years after college, when I retired from competitive swimming, I just thought, okay, as a kid, I swam for 12 years. I'm going to go do Ironman once. So I was mediocre at something I did 12 years. I'll probably be really mediocre at this, but I guess, I'm built much more to cycle and to run than I am to swim. So, and then all those years of swimming kind of built that genetic, or built that aerobic engine that I needed. And so it just all came together. But even in the very beginning, I had no idea that it would evolve into something that would really define so much of my, adult life, really.
When did triathlon start for you? How did you get into triathlon, and when did that start?
That started in 1982. One Saturday afternoon, I was watching Wide World of Sports, which was kind of like the only sporting program at the time. Mm-hmm. And they had the Ironman on television, and I was watching this, and it just blew my mind that people could put their bodies through that, so that they could actually keep going that long, because as a swimmer, I'd swim 100 or 200, and so it was over in 2 minutes. And so, I'm watching these seemingly ordinary people doing this really extraordinary thing, and it just sparked something in me. It immediately was like a calling, like I have to go there and see if I can cross that amazing finish line. And so that was really the the dream that I wanted to do, was just to see if I could finish it. But even that first year, when I was starting to train for the race and doing some shorter distance races just to kind of get a feel for the sport, right away I saw that maybe I had a little more talent for it. But it's so much of what was a shift for me also was not just the genetic toolbox that I had, but it was also a real shift in my mindset. As a swimmer, if somebody got even a half a stroke ahead of me, my race was done. I thought there's no way I can come back on them. But in triathlon, right away I kind of thought, what? It's a long day. Even a short race is 2 hours. So if somebody pulls away early, that doesn't mean that the race is over. And I saw that I was able to just kind of be more relaxed with a dynamic that didn't fit my ideal image of how the race should unfold, and to actually work with it, and then to actually come back on people who had pulled away early. And so it was even from the very beginning in the sport, it was a real eye-opener for me how impactful your mindset is on what happens actually at the end of the day when you cross that finish line.
So Mark, by the sounds of it, you started pretty late. Am I right with triathlon? I mean, when was your first race? Around about 21, 22?
Nah, even later, 24.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I started when I was 24, and so I was kind of getting into the sport late because I didn't have any kind of base in cycling or running, but those two sports really did come pretty easily for me. And again, I had that cardiovascular engine built up from all the years of swimming. So it just it came together. I mean, if you have to sort of add up your 10,000 hours to get to that point where you're really good at something, or you can see how good you're going to be, I kind of hit that earlier just because I had that big backlog of fitness and training being a swimmer. So I came into it, and right away I was able to kind of translate that. But it took a number of years to really refine it. The first 6 years that I was at the Ironman, I could be close to winning. I could be in the lead. I could, but I was never able to win it. And so it took me 7 years to actually really kind of hit the peak of my stride.
So, was it 7 years before you won your first Ironman, Mark? Did I get that right?
Yeah, the first 6 that I did, I didn't win. I finished second twice. I finished third. I finished fifth twice. I could be in the lead at the end of the bike. I could be in the lead halfway through the marathon. One year I was even in the lead with 4 miles to go, but I would always fall apart. And it wasn't coming together. And part of it was indeed my training, but part of it again goes back to my mindset. I was the shift that happened for me, and this was in 1989 as I was getting ready for my 7th Ironman in Hawaii. At that point, how many times are you going to beat your head against the wall and not get what you want? Maybe it's never going to happen, right? And so my family, my friends were saying, hey, look, maybe you're not winning in Kona. You're not beating that guy who's always winning, Dave Scott, but you're winning at so many other races. Go to the ones where you've proven that you can be a champion. And I was pretty close to kind of giving up on the dream that maybe I just didn't have what it would be I didn't have what it would, there was something missing that would enable me to win in Kona. But I had a shift there in 89 as I was thinking, am I going to go back or not another time, a 7th time? And the shift was that I realized it's in a sense stupid for me to try to win because there's only one person who's going to win the race. And so if I don't win, then I don't feel good about the day. But there's so many great things you can get out of that kind of a day. And so my real focus in 1989 was to just figure out how I could have my best race. Forget the other guys, forget Dave Scott, just, focus on getting the best out of my performance that I could. And it was a completely different mindset that I used then, because all of a sudden I just felt free. I tried a lot of different new things in my training that I'd never done before because I didn't feel like I had to be careful, in the sense of if it doesn't work, it's no big deal, And so I actually stumbled on a number of things in my training that really helped me out. And then even on the start line that year, I just had this sense of peace and feeling relaxed that I'd never had there before.
That's incredibly interesting. So basically, you would put a lot of pressure on yourself beforehand, which is obviously something that there's a lot of junior athletes, young athletes that are listening to this podcast, and one of the areas, especially in competitive sports and junior sports, is they put a lot of pressure on themselves, or that pressure can come externally from obviously parents and outside sources. But by the sounds of it, you went from
a lot of especially young athletes, and I was guilty of this. I put so much pressure on myself to win, and again, only one person is going to win each race, but that doesn't mean that you can't bring your best out or learn something from not winning. And that's what I really had to do in 89 was to just let go of that feeling of like, look, it's either win or die, And so I made that shift, and there was so much less pressure. But it also shifted how I viewed my toughest competitor, Dave Scott. I thought, okay, maybe he will win again, or maybe I will win, but I want to, instead of trying to beat him, use his strength to help elevate me to my greatest level. And so that year, instead of trying to beat him and pull away and get a lead and hold on and be the champion, excuse me, I stayed with him actually until mile 24.5 of the marathon. And it was like, all of a sudden instead of being a competitor, he was almost like a collaborator in pulling out the greatest race that I could possibly have. And again, it was another real shift in mindset. It was almost like I was, in a sense, I was playing with the whole thing. It's almost like it was theater in a sense. Of course, it meant a lot to me. That part was still there, but all of a sudden I realized I was getting the best out of my race that I could.
So, Mark, was there any particular mental work you did, mental toughness, mindset work? Was there anything that you would do before a race, or was it basically like see how it is on the day, go out and attack it?
No, I actually did a lot of work on mindset and kind of trying to figure out what is a champion's mindset, and can I practice that? Can I develop it? And a lot of the work and guidance that I received in that area was from a gentleman, Brant Secunda. Mm-hmm. He's, it's a very different relationship than you would imagine, but he's a shaman or medicine man in an Indian tribe from Mexico. Okay. And it's the Huichol Indians who live in central Mexico, and they have a very rich spiritual tradition that's been intact for thousands of years. And a lot of what they do in their tradition is to develop skills that are actually the same things that I needed to be a great athlete. They focus on learning how to quiet their minds. They focus on learning how to give everything they have in this moment, even though maybe what they're after looks impossible to achieve. Like they say, it's never over until it's over, and for me, as I said, as a swimmer, if a guy got a stroke ahead of me, it was over. But, in Huichol philosophy, they would laugh at that and go, it's not over. He's a stroke ahead. Who cares? And so anyway, I studied with Brant starting in 1989, and that was a real shift. I would go to retreats where I would focus on developing, utilizing the practices that he taught to help me just become a better person, and part of being a better person, more whole, with less worries, letting go of like negative emotions like fear or anger or jealousy. Then it just enabled me to embody more of what it took to be a champion. And so anyway, to go back to what I was saying, what's a champion's mindset? For me, that's when you have a kind of like a dual sense of things. One is that you feel this sense of peace that's like, you're just grateful to be alive. You're just grateful that you have a chance to have the health, to be out there racing, to be out there training, but at the same time, have a sense of strength, and strength isn't pumped up self-confidence. Strength is more, in a champion's mindset, is the willingness to just deal with however the race is unfolding, as opposed to trying to control how it's going to unfold. And those are two very different things. The Ironman is so unpredictable. There's wind, there can be wind, it's hot, there can be, the competitors, somebody might come up that you never imagined was going to be strong that year. There's so many variables. If you're trying to control the race and have it match your game plan, you're going to spend so much energy fighting the river, basically, And so in that Huichol way, they would just say, just surrender to life. And so surrendering to life on Ironman Day means just going with the flow, going with the dynamic of the race as it's unfolding, tuning into my own body and realizing that, the champion is not the one who leads the longest. It's the one who crosses the finish line first. And, that really gave me that sense of peace. But in my training, I practiced what Brant would emphasize so many times. He said, just get your mind to be quiet. He said, in the modern world, we think and we talk and we analyze and we have all these things going on in our head. He said, you can never hear the answers to the big questions in life if your mind is always chattering. And
that is so good.
So in every single workout, especially the hard ones, there would be points where it would get difficult, and my mind would start to chatter with all the stuff that we are all so we experience. Like it's too hot, it's too hard, it's too painful. I don't want to quit. I'll come back tomorrow and do this workout, whatever it is. And those were moments where I would just practice getting my mind to shut up. I would just take a breath and just kind of go, okay, there's that quiet space now. There's that peaceful space. And when you're in that, your muscles start to move differently. You flow better. Things loosen up. You tune in to how your body can work in a real balanced way. And most importantly, you stop worrying about the outcome and you embrace the moment that you're in. And that way, that really does enable you to just give everything you have in this step, and then the moment after that, and then the step after that, or the pedal stroke after that, or the swim stroke after that. And that's what adds up in the end to having an amazing race. There's no Ironman that goes perfectly. I don't care who you are. There's going to be moments where you feel great and a lot of moments where you feel lousy. So for me, the key was to not get caught in the down moments and bring myself back into that space that was quiet, that had a sense of peace, trust that somehow it's going to work out, and keep fully engaged in what I was doing, regardless of whether my goal or my dream for the day looked within the realm of reality or looked totally impossible. And that was hard to do. It wasn't easy, but that's what enabled me to stay in that flow more and more and more and longer and longer and longer than probably most of the other guys out there.
Wow, interesting. So it really sounded like you took a more holistic approach, got in more touch with your inner self more than the inner athlete in a way. Would you agree with that? Like it's like more mindfulness and more being present in that moment.
Yeah, I guess you could describe it as that for sure. I mean, today there's so many things that we can analyze and numbers that we can gather during training, and all that stuff is good for giving you, at least in the beginning, an idea of how a feeling in your body relates to something that can be measured. So that felt hard. Well, okay, that meant that, and you look at your device and you see, that my heart rate was whatever, 168 beats a minute, so that was hard. But eventually you reach a point where you have to go beyond the numbers. And that's especially true in a race. And the only way to really do that is to get out of that analyzing mindset and go into a more intuitive space, because the solutions to stuff that go on out on the race course, especially in Ironman, an 8-hour day, a lot of times the answers are going to be things that have nothing to do with logic. And here's an example. In 1989, Dave Scott and I were racing head to head. We swam together, we biked together, we ran together. Again, this is my 7th Ironman. I have 0 victories. At that point, Dave Scott had won 6 Ironman titles. So he was at 6 victories, I was at 0. At the half marathon point, we passed the final person who had been ahead of us, and we were on a pace that was going to set a new world's record. And we stayed together. The pace started to pick up. It got faster and faster and faster. But neither of us could break away. And both of us knew that really now it was going to come down to this last long, pretty steep uphill at mile 24 and a half of the marathon. Because nothing else was going to be significant enough to make a difference in our performance. And so at the bottom of that hill was an aid station. And common wisdom says, okay, at the bottom of the hill, this is where it's going to happen. You grab one last glass of Gatorade or whatever it is you're going to drink, get a little more calories in there, and then take off. And so both Dave and I, we both knew that this is what the other guy's thinking, right? And so he got to the inside track to that last aid station at the bottom of the hill. He grabbed a glass of something, and I started to come in right behind him to do the same thing. And just something inside of me just said, go. And it was like I was shot out of a cannon. I pulled my hand back. I didn't get that last glass of whatever I was going to get. I started sprinting as best as you can at the end of an Ironman.
Yeah.
And in the few seconds it took for Dave to reach over, grab his last glass of sport drink, and look back, I put a gap on him of about 10 feet. And it completely blew his mind. Like all of a sudden, I was pulling away on a part of the course that was really his strength. He was the best guy in the last 2 hours of the race. And it was such a counterintuitive thing that happened, because I didn't get that last little bit of calories. I was risking running out of gas, but I put a gap on him. And you can see in the footage in the show that they showed on television, all of a sudden his shoulders come up and he's tightening and he's rocking and you can tell it, he's all of a sudden he's stiffer because he's having to deal with something that he hadn't expected. Yeah. And I just continued to accelerate away and I went on to win my first title that year. But those kind of answers, you're never going to Google and get them. You're never going to be able to plan it out in advance and go, okay, this is what you do when you get to that hill if you guys are together. It's so different. if you tap into that. But to tap into it, you got to shut your mind off and get that quiet space so that hopefully at the right moment, the right thoughts do come to you.
Mark, did you ever do visualization, purposeful visualization before a race? Was that ever part of your training program?
Yeah, I did that in the early years. I did it in the late years of my swimming and also in the early years of triathlon. But I eventually realized that, that sets up a certain amount of positive reinforcement for something you want to have happen. But for me, it didn't fully work. And part of the reason is that, like I said, if the race starts looking completely different than my pre-race visualization, I didn't know how to deal with it. And, that's when the chatter would start. And that's when, that cynical part of my brain would say, it's not working out. I can't do it. It's, wah, poor me. I'd go into that sort of space until I met Brant, until I started studying with him. And then when the race stopped going the way I had imagined that it possibly could, it didn't bother me. I wasn't attached to the fact that all of a sudden, this guy is pulling away and I can't keep up with him, or otherwise I'll blow up. It's too early to go as hard as he is, or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And, that takes a lot of trust. But again, visualization is one aspect of what can help you lay the foundation for a great performance in competition. But it's not, to me, it's not the end game. The end game is figuring out how to get in that space that will just completely surrender to the real dynamic of what's going to happen out there, and then be willing to come up with a solution that maybe you never thought of in advance.
Mark, you a few times mentioned that inner chatter, that self-talk, that inner voice. How important is that, and how can, there's a lot of junior athletes out here, or athletes that are listening to this right now, how can one improve that inner voice?
Well, there's a couple levels of it. I mean, some people try to focus on having positive thoughts, and positive thoughts are good for sure. They're better than negative thoughts, because when you're in a competition, the thoughts you have affect things very quickly, and they affect your performance very quickly. The challenge is, though, and here's the challenge. Maybe, even in advance, you've written down some positive affirmation statements that you've memorized, and you're going to say those to yourself in the race, especially if you start feeling yourself get into that cynical space, or, your body's getting tired, or whatever it is. You're going to repeat them, like, I cut through the wind like an arrow, or whatever it is on the bike, or I, floated like, like a butterfly on the run, or, whatever you come up with. The challenge is, though, first of all, is that maybe in a short race you can remember those things, but in a long race, you have a hard time remembering stuff like that. And secondly, even if you can remember them, I'm speaking for myself, even if I could remember them, and sometimes I could, when I was feeling really lousy, I didn't believe any of that. It's like, no, I don't feel light as a feather. I feel heavy as an elephant out here, and this guy's pulling away. And so anyways, to go back to young athletes, maybe you've never done any of this stuff. So you can start with, first of all, having positive thoughts for sure. Telling yourself, look, maybe today wasn't a great day. I didn't go as fast as I wanted, but tomorrow will be a different day. Mm-hmm. The next race will be a different race. Just because something unfolded the way it did today doesn't mean it's going to happen the next time. And let me work on it. And then secondly, like I was saying, don't wait until race day to practice getting yourself to just shut up. It would be like going into the race not doing any physical training. And so again, if let's say you're a miler, or you run 5Ks, or whatever it is, whatever your sport is as a younger athlete, anytime you're in a workout, anytime you're in a practice session and you feel it going south, maybe you're working on a skill and you're getting frustrated. That's the perfect time to take that breath and go, okay, now let me try it again. So maybe you're a gymnast and you're working on a specific skill, and you're blowing it, you're getting more frustrated, You're getting worse at it instead of better. You take that breath. Okay. And then you go and you try it again. And maybe you don't do it perfectly, but maybe you do it better than that last time you just did it and it was terrible. So you've improved and you've improved your mindset. And you take another breath and you do it again and it goes a little bit better. And again, and it goes a little bit better. And maybe on that day you don't perfect it, but you have pulled yourself out of a bad place and shown yourself that you can turn something around by being quiet. And that's ultimately true self-confidence. And that's ultimately the kind of image or experience that you want to have in your training, so that when you're in a race, that becomes your natural go-to thing. You start to feel your thoughts chatter, your performance is dropping, your mindset's going south. You know that everything you're saying to yourself is not helping. Take that breath, pull it back, re-engage. Regrouping is not giving up. And I think people, and regrouping can be as short as just taking one breath, getting your mind to be quiet, and then sort of re-engaging in your competition. It doesn't mean that you've got to go rest for 5 minutes. It takes 1 second. And that can be golden for any athlete of any age.
Can you is it possible to stay focused for 8 hours?
Well, you can keep moving for 8 hours. Let me put it that way, for sure. And focused is that's another reason why it's really good if you can be quiet. When you're quiet, you stay engaged without it taking a lot of effort. Anytime you start thinking about what's going on out there and how many miles you have left and how many you've gone and what you're going to need at the next aid station, all of a sudden you're using up a lot of energy just with that mental calculating that you're doing. And all of a sudden time sort of gets slow again. Time actually speeds up, and those 8 hours go by fairly quickly. If they go by quicker when you're just sort of in that engaged flow of things, and that's what I tell people, is that time is really flexible out there. Sometimes it just crawls. You're on your bike and you think you've ridden 5 or 10K, but you've only ridden 1K, and the same, it can go the other direction too. You can think you've only ridden 5K and all of a sudden you're 25K down the road. And so no, it's not staying focused all the time. It's more just staying present and just tuning into the rhythm of your body, tuning into how you're moving. And it actually becomes fairly effortless. And it's not like you're having to focus to keep on pace with things. It just kind of happens. But you have to keep coming back to that place. There's 1,000 times where you'll be out of that space and all of a sudden it feels like, I'm having to focus to get my muscles to move and all that. And so you regroup. You have a little sport drink, you have some water, you kind of sit up for a second on your bike, or you shake your shoulders on the run, or whatever it is. And then you try to get back into that flow of things. And that's how you're able to, quote unquote, focus for that many hours.
This might be a funny question, but out on the bike, for example, in the middle of a race, would you start any conversations with any fellow competitors, or was it pretty much dead quiet out there?
It's pretty dead quiet. It's like, what are you going to say? Hey, how you feeling, huh? And the other side is you don't really need to actually talk to people to know how they're feeling. You really sense it. You're shifting into kind of like a very different space than you would be, let's say, when you're sitting on your couch talking with all these guys, or sitting in the restaurant afterwards or whatever. But when you're out there, that's where you're focused, I should say. That's, in a sense, you don't want to be distracted with a conversation. You don't want to engage in that verbal thing, because anytime you start talking, it uses a different part of your brain than your physical flow part. They're two very different parts. And so if you can keep that sort of verbal conversational part, just on idle and not really use it, then you have a lot more energy in your brain to keep activating the physical movement flowing part. And
This is so interesting. What was there any guys out there that would try and engage in some smack talk or anything like that? Any mental war games out there?
oh, all those mental war games happened before the race, at the press conference or, wherever it was. But no, in the race, everybody was pretty much, you know, at least with me, they knew that there was nothing that they could say to me that would throw me off my game. So I don't think they even tried. But I didn't see it happening really at all. No, it didn't really happen. It's not like other sports where, you're hanging out in between plays or innings or whatever it is where there's always these breaks. Our stuff is the gun
Non-stop.
goes off and it's over. You don't stop until you cross that finish line. There is no break time to throw the guy an evil look or whatever it is. But and the good thing in triathlon is that most of the guys respect each other, and so even though they're trying to beat each other, they're doing it because they respect the other athletes' abilities and performances. There's very little of that sort of competition that's driven out of just despising your competitor.
Mark, another question that we get quite a lot is nerves, and do the champions get nervous? Did you ever get nervous before races?
Oh yeah, for sure. I was always nervous before races. I actually only had one race where I wasn't nervous before, and it was one of the hardest races I ever had because I couldn't raise my performance up to race level. And so I realized that if you can get those nerves in the right space, they're actually really good. That's what enables you to go to a level that you never go to in training. And so, of course, the challenge is to not let it get out of control and completely blow your focus and blow your cool. So it's a very fine line that you gotta try to find there. But probably for any advice for people who feel like I train well and I get in the race and I completely blow it, or I get in my competition I completely blow it. Just first and foremost, reaffirm to yourself that nerves are actually what are going to enable you to have the performance that you're actually searching for. And so view them as a good thing. And if you can view them as a good thing, then I think it'll help you to actually relax just enough so that then you're in that sort of nice balance between being nervous, but at the same time being calm. And so that's sort of what you're searching for, is nervous with a certain sense of calmness. And that combination is lethal when it comes to pulling the best out of you that you can.
Yeah, well said. I mean, that's going to help a lot of athletes out there, because that's a question we get quite a lot: is how do we deal with nerves, and are nerves a good thing? So I always said it was your ready to go gas. It's get worried if you don't have nerves, because nerves means, or it tells you that it means a lot to you as well. So which is a good thing. Mark, where does confidence come from?
Well, there's kind of two kinds. There's a confidence that is sort of self-inflicted, like you're telling yourself you're confident, but it's not real confidence. You're hoping that you'll have it, but you really don't have it. And that you usually see it in the athletes that talk a lot. Not all of them. Some of them that talk a lot are confident, but then the other then there's the real confidence. Some of that real confidence comes from your training. When you do a training session and you hit a new mark, that does give you self-confidence. Like, wow, I can do this. Especially if it's a mark that, if you're looking into the future, you have a sense that it will help you actually achieve the result you're after in the real competition. That can give you a lot of self-confidence for sure. But true self-confidence to me is, I would say this a lot came from studying with Brant Secunda, is just trusting in life. Trusting that no matter how it turns out, your life is going to be good. Your life is going to go on. It's not death and doom if you don't have the race or the competition that you're hoping for. And just to use every moment that you can out there as a chance to try to get the best you can out of yourself. And at the end of the day, if that's what you do, then that's fine. And when you have that, then if things are in a moment where maybe your dream looks impossible, it doesn't freak you out because you're not as attached to having that be the goal of the day. If the goal of the day is to bring the best of you out that you can, then you see those challenging moments as just part of that. When it's challenging, that is what brings the best in you out. If it's easy, the best of you lies dormant. It's not going to waste its time coming out, when it's easy. The best inside of you, your personal greatness, your power, your strength, your ultimate performance comes out when it does get tough. And so, that's, I think, true self-confidence, when you can embrace the really, really challenging aspects of competition and just have it know that that's the secret sauce that's going to help you be the best that you can be. And that's self-confidence.
That's some great advice. Mark, these days in the sports environment, sports world, we hear the words grit and resilience a lot. In your opinion, where does grit come from? Are you born with grit? Do you develop grit? Where does grit come from, in your opinion?
Well, I think grit can actually come from disappointments. I don't think you have much grit if it all comes easy to you. And you can see this a lot in athletes who had a lot of natural talent when they were young. They never developed the ability to actually be disciplined with their training and to really focus. And so when all of the lesser athletes, in the sense that they don't quite have the natural talent of that type of person, once they catch up because they know how to do the work, the person who never developed that grit because it came easy, they're done, and so I think that's where grit actually comes from disappointment and from falling short or feeling like you really don't have all that natural talent, so you've got to work hard to get there. And I don't think you'll see anybody at the very top who was just born with that came into it with that supernatural talent. I mean, look at Michael Jordan. He was cut from his high school team or whatever, and look at me. I was a mediocre swimmer, but I developed sort of that grit of just digging down and trying to get the best I could out of myself. And then all of a sudden, when that found the right sport, then it really flourished.
Going from the hunter to the hunted, was there anything that changed in your mindset or your approach once you were the guy everybody else was chasing?
That's a great question, Allistair. I think one of the faults that can happen with somebody who hits the top of something is to assume that now they've got it figured out. And all they have to do is just do what they did last year, and they're going to get the same top of the heat performance this coming year. I never did that. I always felt like, yeah, maybe I figured out some things for myself, but I am not going to take that for granted. And so every year when I went into my training, maybe the other guys looked at me as, okay, he's the guy to beat, and everybody else we're going to have to work together to figure out how to do that. But I always went into it still feeling like all of those guys had just as much of a chance to win as me. So I still felt like, even in all those 6 that I won, I felt like I was the one who was still the hunter. And maybe that's why I was able to win six Ironmans and 6 starts, because I continued to evolve how I trained, what I brought into it, the mix of physical and mental and spiritual, where I placed the emphasis each year to compensate for, age as I got older. So I don't know if that's kind of what other guys would say, but that's how I did it. I never stood there and said, I'm the one who's being hunted now, or, so it didn't bother me either, knowing that the other guys thought I was the guy to beat. But I knew that I was just as vulnerable as anybody else. So I never took it for granted just because I'd won it the last time.
Sure. Mark, you won your last one at the age of 37, which was the oldest at that stage. Is that still the oldest Ironman to win Kona?
No, Australian Craig Alexander broke that in 2011. He won it at age 38. So he's the oldest champion at this point for the men. Yeah, he's a great competitor. He's still competing. I think he's 45 or something like that. And
Wow.
he's one of those guys that'll just, I think, be competing until he drops dead. But
Wow. A lot of respect for that, and such
yeah.
probably the toughest sport in the world. So,
Mm.
no, great stuff, Mark. So, Mark, going to finish off with a few quick fire questions, and
Mm.
there's no preparation for this, so you're going to have to be super confident. Are you ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. Favorite food?
Oh, Mexican food.
Okay. Favorite movie?
Favorite movie. Oh boy. I I love all of those series movies, like Star Wars and all the Marvel Comics movies. I love that stuff. It's total fantasy. I love it because for me, movies is a getaway.
Action heroes?
Yeah, all action heroes and fantasy stuff. I don't go to movies for a serious, deep meaning.
Favorite book?
Favorite book. Well, I don't know. I honestly have to say I've written a couple of books. Brant and I wrote Fit Soul, Fit Body, 9 Keys to a Healthier, Happier You. And I hate to say that's my favorite book, but it might be just because I feel like there's so much in there that is great for people to maybe elevate their lives a little bit.
What was the name of those books again, Mark? So the listeners
It's
can.
called Fit Soul, Fit Body, 9 Keys to a Healthier, Happier You.
Perfect, and it's available on Amazon.
It is, huh?
Super. Favorite city or place visited?
Oh, favorite place. Oh, well, my most recent favorite place, I was down in South Africa. I went to Jeffreys Bay.
Okay.
I surfed there for 6 days before the Ironman 70.3 World Championships. And I was lucky. I caught one of the best swells they had this past winter and got by far the best wave of my life. And to do that at age 60 is mind blowing. But
No ways. It's down in J Bay. You can obviously pick up from my accent that I was brought up in South Africa, but up in Johannesburg.
it's such an amazing way. Nowadays, that's what I do is I surf. I live 2 blocks from the one of the main breaks here in Santa Cruz, California, and so I just take my board, walk down, paddle out. I surfed as a kid, and so I surf most days. I still run for conditioning, and I do some functional strength work. So those are my 3 sports that I do nowadays, and I just love it.
Well, funny you should mention that because I actually I'm down here in Malibu at the moment, and obviously that's a big surfing place. And Lord Hamilton, I was ordering a Starbucks, and at all people, Lard walks in. So small, the king of the longboard came in. So
Wow, great.
yeah, favorite athlete, male and female, past or present.
One of the greatest inspirations I got was it was the LA Olympics and it was the marathon, both with Joan Benoit who won. It was the first time the women had the marathon in the Olympics, and she was just amazing. She's so humble. And then the men was Carlos Lopes, and he won it. He was either 37 or 38 years
That's
old at the
right.
time, and it just blew me away. Like, oh my God, you can be at a world class level easily into your late 30s. It blew my mind, and I just maybe that set the tone for me to just keep going when I was competing and to actually do what I did all the way till I was 37.
That just made me think there for a second. Talking about South Africa, we had a big endurance race down there called the Comrades Marathon,
Oh yeah.
and one of the oldest winners there was a German guy called, if I can remember, I'm going back 25 years now, Charlie Mott, was it?
Hmm.
I might be wrong, but did you ever consider Comrades Marathon? Was it anything in your
Mm.
plans? Never.
No, a lot of people ask me that when I can stop when I retire from competition and triathlon. I said, "What are you going to do now? Are you going to do like 50 milers, do comrades, or?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "No, I'm done. I'm really done." 26.2 miles. That was plenty far enough for me.
Yeah, it's like a little bit like finishing a concert and then them begging for we want more, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
All right, last few. Tea, coffee, or protein shake?
Oh, nowadays, coffee. For a long time, it was tea, and when I was racing, for sure, there were a few protein shakes in the mix.
Okay. All right. Any pet peeves?
I don't. Yeah, I guess my biggest pet peeve is I don't like wasting time. I feel like life is so precious, and it's like if I feel like I'm wasting time or somebody's wasting my time, it bugs me. Like I'll never get this moment back. So why not get the most out of the moment? That doesn't mean that I have to be busy. It just might mean that instead of being busy, I'm actually quiet. Or so that's my pet peeve.
Final question. What, in your opinion, does it take to be champion-minded?
To be a champion, well, it takes being in the right environment, meaning having a support crew that also has the vision of helping you become a champion. No champion gets there on their own. Part of it really does take commitment and patience. Probably one of the biggest things missing for a lot of folks is the patience to develop their skills and their abilities in a way that really can take them all the way. They try to get there too quickly and then they burn out or get injured. A lot of it does take the right mindset. Every sport has its subtleties of how you would tweak that, but basically, it's having a willingness to put everything on the line, knowing that it's a risk that the result may not be what you want. And a lot of folks are, even though they really seem like they're going for it, they're cautious in the sense that they don't fully put everything into an endeavor because they're afraid that maybe it won't turn out the way they hope. And so if they hold back a little bit, then there's that excuse like, oh, well, I didn't give it everything I could. And maybe, so it really does being willing to just sort of risk your ego, really, because, it's not failure to give everything you have. It's only a failure if you judge it that way. So,
what a way to finish, Mark. Again, truly honored. Thank you so much for coming on to the Champion Minded podcast.
Great to be here, Allistair. Anytime. Happy to be here. Thanks.
So guys, there you have it, the legendary Mark Allen. A big thanks to him for taking the time to come on to the Champion Minded podcast. Remember to check out his coaching page, markallencoaching.com, and he's also on Twitter, Mark Allen Grip. Guys, big thank you again for your reviews and for the comments you leave on iTunes and on YouTube. Connect with me on social media, on Twitter at Allistair McCall, Instagram BeChampionMinded, and on Facebook Allistair McCall page. So remember, you were made for greatness. Now go do the work. Stay champion minded, everybody.